Welcome to today's webinar, After School Program Quality, What States Are Doing to Drive Equality Forward, brought to you by NCSL. It is now my pleasure to turn the floor over to Ashley Wallace. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for joining us today. Welcome. This is Ashley Wallace. I'm a program director with the Education Program at the National Conference of State Legislatures. My areas of expertise are in after-school, summer learning, social-emotional learning, and school calendar issues. I also oversee our program's early learning work. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. The presentation can be downloaded at any time during the presentation. Simply click on the media library icon located at the upper right-hand corner. The webinar will be archived within 1 week. Please go to www.ncsl.org/webinars to access all webinar archives. You can ask a question at any time by entering it into the chat box located in the lower left-hand side of the screen. As you may know, there's research that shows connections between high-quality after-school programs and positive outcomes, including gains in academic performance, improved school attendance, increased student engagement, and reductions in problem behavior. Research also tells us that after-school programs are most effective when they're evidence-based and of high quality. So we wanted to host this webinar today so that you can hear from an after-school quality expert who will share the findings of her landscape quality system scan of the 50 states. Then we'll explore from various perspectives how Utah is boosting after-school program quality through various pieces of legislation and through a case study. This webinar is supported by the Royal Stewart Foundation. You'll hear statewide after-school networks referred to throughout this webinar, so I want to take a moment to talk about what those are. For more than a decade, the Mott Foundation's made investments in networks of diverse groups of stakeholders and organizations to come together to build public will and systems for after-school and summer learning. Now reaching every state, the 50 state after-school networks foster partnerships and policies to develop, support, and sustain high-quality opportunities for children and youth. And now to introduce our speakers today. First, we'll have Jaime Singer. Jaime is a senior consultant at American Institutes for Research in the Youth Development and Supported Learning Environments practice area. Singer has expertise in developing, implementing, and managing projects related to continuous quality improvement. She has 13 years of experience supporting the after-school and expanded learning field. Singer has presented at national, regional, and statewide conferences on topics such as developing and implementing project-based learning activities in after-school programs, evaluation, and using data for continuous program improvement. Ben Trentelman is the Director of Operations for the Utah After-School Network. Ben has worked with several youth-serving and after-school organizations, and throughout his career, he's organized community-building events, statewide youth leadership conferences, and helped to pilot collaborative youth arts programs. After becoming the president of the After-School Utah Association, Ben was able to work hand-in-hand with the Utah After-School Network to merge the two organizations. Next, we'll have Dr. Wynn Shooter. He's an assistant director for the Utah Education Policy Center, where he works primarily on education program evaluations. Much of his work involves serving out-of-school time programs and community partners. Wynn has over 18 years of experience designing, implementing, and studying educational experiences. And then we'll have Senator Luz Escamilla. She has represented District 1 in the Utah Senate since 2009. She's the first Latina elected to the Utah Senate and the first immigrant elected to the Utah Legislature. She currently serves as the Senate's Assistant Minority Whip. And now I'll turn it over to our first speaker, Jaime Singer.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Hi, everyone. As Ashley said, this is Jaime Singer, and I'm a Senior Technical Systems Consultant at the American Institutes for Research. And before I get started talking through the landscape of quality and presenting some of that information, I wanted to provide just a little bit of background about AIR and what we are. So I won't read the slides here about our mission, but a couple of things I wanted to point out is that we are the oldest not-for-profit social science research and practice firm in the world, and our name is kind of a misnomer. So about half of my colleagues do indeed work on research, but the other half of us, including myself, as you could probably tell from my bio or my title, we work on policy, practice, and systems change as technical assistance consultants and as capacity builders. So that's really some of the work that I'll be talking about today, and it's nice that I do work hand in hand with researchers and evaluators and really translate a lot of that research into practice and into usable tools. And then finally, we do have through this, we're a very large organization, global organization, but in this very large organization, we have a dedicated group of more than 100 people who focus on the positive development of young people, both in school and in out-of-time settings in partnership with families, schools, and communities. And that is the Youth Development and Supportive Learning Environments practice area that Ashley mentioned when she was reading my bio. So we do have a group of people who really focus on a lot of these issues and do research on them, and then also turn that research into usable tools and resources for everyone working in the field. And as Ashley mentioned also, we have been working with the statewide after-school networks through funding from the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation for a very long time to support the 50 state after-school networks as part of the After-School Technical Assistance Collaborative. And our role as part of that collaborative is to focus on topics of quality, which is what I'll be speaking to you about today. So Ashley had mentioned that quality is important, and you're going to hear me reiterate that. But before we jump into why it's important, I want to lay a little bit of the foundation about what I mean when I say quality, or what those of us who are going to talk about quality mean. So I break it down often into these two different levels. So you have the organization level and the program levels of quality. And the organization level is really those behind the scenes or the management level pieces of quality. So if you walked into a quality after school program, these aren't necessarily going to be things that you see when you're in the program. They're kind of the behind the scenes things that include things like intentional program design. So is there time set aside for program staff to work together to design the program? Supportive hiring and development of staff. So are there sound hiring processes? Is there ongoing professional development for staff in the program? Included in organizational level are the strong links between families, schools, and then the broader community and the resources in the community. There's opportunities for authentic youth inputs and leadership into the program, and then explicit connections between the program design and the school day. So we definitely want after school to look different than the school day. It shouldn't just be an extension of the school day, but it should have that strong alignment and connection to the school day in order to see those youth outcomes that Ashley mentioned before. And then the program level quality, which you might also hear referred to as activity level or point of service quality, is what you would see when you actually walk into a program. So these are kind of the tangible things. You're going to see hands-on, inquiry-based activities. You're going to see a physical and psychologically safe and secure space for young people and the adults working with them to be. You're going to see emotional support, moral support. You'll see positive relationships between adults and young people, among the young people, among the adults, opportunities for those close relationships with peers, feeling a sense of belonging, developing positive social values and norms, and having those opportunities to develop confidence in your own skills and making a contribution to community. So when we're going through all of the information that I'll be talking about today, I'm really talking about both of these aspects of quality, both of the things you don't see that lay the foundation for the quality, and then also the things that you do see. And the reason we're talking about this today, I mean, Ashley mentioned this, is that quality is important. We know through a lot of research now, we have a lot of research to back this up, that it's not just after-school programs that are getting these positive youth outcomes. It's the quality after-school programs that are getting positive youth outcomes, improved social skills and interpersonal behavior, improved grades and work habits, improved test scores, and then also reduced misconduct and risky behaviors. So we see improvement of the good things we want to see and decline in the maybe the more risky behaviors and the misconduct that we don't necessarily want to see. So the other thing that we know through studying quality and what makes a quality program is that these things don't just happen by accident. So it requires really an intentional process both at the program level, so the staff actually working in the programs, those staff supporting people working in the programs, all the way up to the systems level. And that's really where we are working as part of the After-School Technical Systems Collaborative to support the 50-state after-school network so that they can help sort of trickle this down to the programs. There's supports all along this path. So to get a better idea of what elements of quality existed nationally, we embarked on this grand scheme to improve quality to figure out what's happening in all the different states. We did this first scan in 2013, and back then there were not after-school networks in all 50 states. We've already seen huge growth from the first time we conducted the scan to the most recent one, which was in the fall of 2017. So the most recent scan, with the numbers you'll see here today, do represent all 50 states and really that broad reach of what the networks are doing across all 50 states. So we included these 5 components of quality in the information we were collecting. So we collected information from the network leads. We scoured websites, we sent out surveys and emails, we followed up with phone calls, and really tried to get as much information as possible to determine what's happening in the states related to these 5 components of quality. So for the quality standards, these are practices of after-school programs should adhere to in order to support quality programs. So these are statewide quality standards for after-school and expanded learning programs. And within the quality standards, there are often several different categories that could relate to, for instance, the organizational processes, like I talked about before. They might relate to staffing, to the environment, to the relationships, to health and safety. So all of these different components of the quality standards roll up into these state quality standards. Assessment tools are often aligned with the standards that are in place within a state, but they may look different from state to state. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we come to the slide showing how many of the states in which states indicated having assessment tools. But some states have adopted reliable and valid tools that have been developed by external organizations. Some have created their own assessment tools, and they look different depending on which state they're in and what they're using it for. The third component we collected information on was core knowledge and competencies. These are the knowledge, skills, and dispositions needed by professionals in the field to provide the high-quality after-school programming and to support the learning and development of the young people. The fourth thing we looked for was Credential Systems, and this is when individuals can receive credentials through coursework or other learning opportunities, and it's often part of a larger professional development system. And finally, the fifth thing we collected information on was quality rating and improvement systems. These are designed to recognize the quality of a program or provider and help them continually improve, often with the support of some sort of network or system. And when we get to the slide, I'll talk a little bit more about how we do need to dive into this one a little bit more to figure out exactly what's happening in each of the states that indicated perhaps that they do have a quality rating and improvement system or that they're working on one. That is just a brief overview of the 5 different components we focused on and then kind of how we went about doing it. So I'll break each one of these down and talk through what exactly did we find. So for quality standards, you can see from this map that the majority of state networks did indicate that they have statewide quality standards. There's 38 states, indicated they have quality standards. 7 states indicated that they're in the process of developing quality standards, and 5 indicated not having quality standards at this time. So one of the things I want to point out as you're looking at this map, if you're looking at it and you say, oh yeah, my state is represented, we have quality standards, I do want to point out that you could have a neighboring state that also has quality standards, and it might look very different. So in some states, for instance, the State Department of Education has signed on or endorsed the standards, and it's part of an embedded system that after-school programs throughout the state really all tie into, or maybe perhaps it's tied to like some sort of statewide funding, while in other states they're still working towards unifying, advancing those standards in some sort of coherence throughout the state. So having a green state, or yellow state, or red state, there's still variability among all of what exactly is happening in those states. And I'll talk a little bit about how we're taking the information we learned from the landscape of quality and the scan and trying to dive into a little bit more to answer some of the questions of what does it look like in the different states. But for now, I'll go through and finish telling you what we found from the scan before I talk about that. So the next component is assessment tools. And again, majority of states indicated having some sort of assessment tool, having or using an assessment tool. So 34 states indicated having or using one. 8 are in the process of developing, adapting, or adopting an assessment tool. And then 8 indicated not having an assessment tool at this time. And I sort of mentioned this before. The assessment tools are fairly varied in terms of what they measure, whether or not they're aligned to the standards, who developed them, if they've been validated, and they can look very different. So in some states, for instance, there may be an assessment tool that is kind of like a checklist. So perhaps there are a list of the standards or maybe the indicators that roll up into the standards, and then programs will then just check off whether or not they are adhering to that standard. On the other end of the spectrum is perhaps more of a rubric-based assessment tool where you have vignettes or examples of what does it look like to be basic in this area? What does it look like to be emerging? What does it look like to be exemplary? And so there are those little examples that programs can kind of look at those and say like, oh yeah, I think we are, we're basic here, but we're exemplary there. And the idea with these assessment tools often is that they're not meant to be high stakes or punitive, but they're really meant to help programs along their path to quality. So, programs should not look at this and say, okay, we're trying to get exemplary in all of these, or we're trying to check the box in every single thing, but we're always working toward moving the needle on program quality. And so with any of these pieces, you'll hear me say this several times throughout, with any of these pieces, for those of you who are on and are not currently connected with a network, I really encourage you to reach out to the network in your state and find out more, like how, if you're seeing on this map, like, oh yes, we do have an assessment tool, reach out and figure out, what does that look like? Is it part of a very cohesive, coherent system, or are there certain programs engaging in that process and others are not? Like, what does it look like in your state? Definitely encourage you to reach out. So for the third component, you'll see this drops down a bit. So when we get to core knowledge and competencies, and you'll see in the next 3, we're a little bit closer to half of the states showing that, yes, we have core knowledge and competencies. There are 27 states saying, yes, we have these. 10 say they're in the process of developing or adapting, and then 13 indicated not having core knowledge and competencies. And so the developing or adapting piece is there are core knowledge and competencies that the National Afterschool Association has, and so some states have decided just we're going to take those exactly as they are from NAA, and we're going to adopt those as the core knowledge and competencies in our state. While other states perhaps are adapting them to align specifically with perhaps the quality standards that are in the state, which may be a little different. They might also be based on some other standards, but are really specific to the state that they're in. So these also vary in terms of how they're used, the core knowledge and competencies. Some states align all of training and the supports that they offer to the core knowledge and competencies, while other states might not have such a sophisticated system yet. They might still be working toward that. They might be focused right now on developing quality standards first and then moving on to these aligned processes. And we see something similar with the credential systems as well. So 24 states indicated having a credential system, 5 indicated being a process, and then 21 indicated not having one. And as a reminder, this is where program staff can receive credentials through coursework or other learning opportunities, and it's often part of a larger professional development system. So you can see that really starting to set the groundwork or the foundation for quality, those quality standards, the assessment tool. We see a lot of states working on that or having done that. And then when we get to these aligned pieces for staff, we have a lot more states working on that. So we know that's somewhere where we can support the networks in this and support a lot of sharing among networks. And finally, for the quality rating and improvement systems, this is also close to half. We have 23 states indicated having a QRIS, Quality Rating and Improvement System. 11 indicated being in the process of developing one, and then 16 indicated not having a QRIS. And one thing to note, I kind of previewed this when I was talking about it before, is that having sort of a check mark in this area indicates that the state could have recommended that they have a QRIS in place for early childhood or for school-age youth, or both. And so this is an area where we do need to dive in a little bit more and determine, ask a little more pointed questions about the QRIS, because quality rating and improvement systems are rated start in the early childhood space, and in some states they are wrapping school-age youth into a current QRIS. In other states, they're developing parallel systems. So this is another area where it would benefit from us perhaps doing some case studies or pulling out some state profiles to highlight a few different examples of how states have gone about doing this. So there's a lot of variability. Okay, so now what? So we've seen that the majority of states have statewide quality standards or are working on them. And this is great because we know having quality standards, having some sort of standards in place really helps to ensure that there is shared language and an understanding of what it means to be a quality program. So I started off, this whole webinar is focused on quality. I wanted to make sure I started off by saying, here's what I'm talking about when I talk about quality, so we're all on the same page. This is what quality standards do in a statewide system. Make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about quality. It also, importantly, provides staff who are working in programs an idea of what to strive for in their programming. So when I go out and do trainings or workshops with staff, you ask the question, who wants to run a quality program? Of course, everyone wants to run a quality program. What I hear over and over again people struggle with is, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I don't quite know, is this what I should be doing? What am I missing? How can I be doing better? So those quality standards really starts to set the stage for what is it that you should be striving for? What is it that we should be working on? Same with an assessment tool. So we've seen that the majority of states have some sort of assessment tool. So figuring out how are they using that assessment tool? Are programs interacting with that? Are they using it for some continuous improvement within their own programs? Are they taking the information and not setting milestones or goals for themselves to achieve for that ongoing improvement? And then as we work up into the more aligned pieces for staff, that's where we saw it kind of drop down a little bit to more half and half with the core knowledge and competencies and the credential systems. We know that that is harder. There are a lot of systems in place that have to be aligned. There are a lot of players that are involved. So setting the stage is a great place to start. But how can we continue pushing the needle and ensuring that we do have these aligned supports for staff? Because we know that quality staff are so important. Those positive relationships in after-school programs, we know how important those are for the outcomes, the positive outcomes that we're hoping for our young people. And I want to reiterate here, too, the importance of following up with the network in your state and those staff to find out more about what is happening in your state. So if you saw something on a map like, oh, I wonder, oh, maybe we were a red state and we don't have anything going on. Like, is that true? Do we really not have anything going on? Or are we trying to set a stage for something to get started? So it's a great opportunity to reach out and find out more. And as AIR and part of our support to the networks, we are also working on finding out more. This scan is a great resource, and the information in it is so fantastic. The actual document is all hyperlinked, so you can click, for instance, on Utah. I'm going to use Utah because all of you are on for your presentation. You can click on Utah's check mark and go to their website and see the information that they have in each of the different categories. But the thing that's missing from this standalone document is the process. And so that's where we are going next, that our support to the networks is not just to the network siloed individually, but the power of the networks is really in the sharing among everyone. And there's so much sharing to be done. There's much knowledge and great creativity within the networks that we want to help facilitate that sharing. And so one of the things that we're doing with this information is developing state profiles and associated what we're calling quality cards. They're kind of like baseball cards. So the state profiles are a way to highlight the process that the network and the state actually went through to develop quality standards. So we are focusing the state profiles at this point in time on quality standards specifically, since that's that kind of first component. And we're asking network leads to respond to a series of questions to find out more about how did they engage stakeholders in the process? Who did they involve in the process? How often did they meet? What advice do they have for states that are just getting started? What challenges did they encounter, and then how did they overcome them? And what's something that they're most proud of? And so we're hoping we'll start setting the foundation for that so important process piece. So when new network leads come in, or if a network or state decides, yes, we're ready to embark on this next step of quality, that how piece becomes so important. And so we will continue facilitating this process and reaching out to additional networks. Right now we have state profiles and quality cards with Illinois, Indiana, New Mexico, Minnesota, Michigan, Wyoming, California, and Arkansas, as you can see on the slide. And we are working with Ben in Utah, who you'll hear from next, to develop out a state profile and quality card for Utah. So this is another piece in helping to support that process across the networks. And I also want to mention that if you get an opportunity to reach out to the network staff in your state, one of the things that I would encourage everyone to do is try to visit a quality after-school program. Your network can help set you up to visit one, and seeing these programs in action is just really powerful. Every time I have the good fortune to go into a quality after-school program, I am blown away by the things the young people are working on, by the adults supporting them and working on those things. And I just always think about what would happen if we had quality after-school programs available for all you people and all the amazing things that we could do. So thank you. I think I'm going to end there. This is my contact information. I'm happy to field any questions toward the end, or if we run out of time, there's my email address and my phone number. I will be more than happy to continue talking about this with anyone. Also open to ideas for other ways to share information. Thanks so much.
Hey, Ben.
All right, this is Ben Trunsman with the Utah After School Network, as well as Win Shooter from the Utah Education Policy Center. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about our quality efforts in the state of Utah. To open up, to give you a little bit of backstory to inform what you're about to learn about our quality study here, the Utah After School Network has overseen a quality self-assessment tool that we established in state back in 2008. That is something that was established through numerous partnerships, one being with our Office of Child Care here, as well as our State Board of Education. The Utah Education Policy Center was involved in those efforts back then, where we created a quality self-assessment tool for programs to utilize to do self-assessments throughout the year for their programs. Over the years, that self-assessment has changed. We've been updating it as we've gone. We've worked with committees to update it and everything there. It's been a very good collaborative process. One of the issues that we've run into with the quality tool, and it being a self-assessment, has been the value of the information that is presented to us from programs and how we utilize that. And basically, one of the things that we want to do as a statewide network is we want to be able to measure how much quality is improving for programs throughout the state. And that in itself is very difficult. And in utilizing our quality tool, it as a tool is really just that. It's a self-assessment tool to help programs identify best practices that they need to improve upon. And over the last several years, we've been trying to use it as a measure to gauge how much quality is improving for those programs, which through the use of our quality study, we've identified that is not quite as effective for that. So what has kind of led us to the path to be able to conduct the quality study is a couple years ago during the legislative session, Senator Escamilla worked with us to pass Senate Bill 125. And the focus of this bill was, one, to make our 4 quality areas in our quality self-assessment state rule, state standards for quality after-school programs, and then also to create some funding. It was about $200,000 to go towards programs in the state. When it went through session, it had mixed reviews from the legislator, and basically it ended up passing, but it passed with no fiscal note. And then in the last rounds of the legislative session, they attached a $50,000 note to it, and that wasn't really enough for us to do anything to support a program. Not many programs could do much with $50,000. Don't get me wrong, a lot of programs could really use $50,000, but basically it wasn't the type of mass support for programs throughout the state that we were hoping for. But we were able to actually work with our Office of Child Care, State Board of Education, the Utah Education Policy Center to decide that we used that $50,000 do a quality study on how to effectively support programs in working towards high quality in the 4 areas of our quality self-assessment. And in doing so, we basically created a system to measure the type of impact that we in the state of Utah, to give you a very brief backstory of the Utah After-School Network and the support we provide to programs. We're contracted by the Department of Workforce Services Office of Child Care and our State Board of Education to provide support and technical assistance to programs that they fund. Between the two of them, they fund the majority of our after-school programs in the state. And for those programs, they had no way of really enforcing quality measures, of supporting quality growth for those programs, or having meaningful measures to gauge if the programs were truly impactful. And so basically we were able to work with the Utah Education Policy Center to develop basically the best type of model of technical stuff we could come up with for programs, so the best case scenario of support that we could provide to high need programs in the state. And Wynn will get more into what that looked like as we go along. After we passed SB 125 and we were able to move forward with that quality study, we went through a year of implementation and testing. We have very positive results that you learn about more as we go along here. But basically our quality study in the end ended up informing a new bill that we had passed this most recent legislative session, SB 202, which created an opportunity to fund quality growth initiatives for a select number of after-school programs that are able to apply for these funds. And so basically for these programs that apply for these grant funds will receive a year of funding where they will receive funding to engage in a high-level quality improvement process, where they will receive intensive support from the staff in my office, and then as they continue to improve throughout the year, they may be able to receive an additional year of continual funding as they're improving quality for their programs. And so basically we've had this great system that has been building on all of this and contributing to this conversation that has led to a very robust technical assistance system, great quality improvement system, and a lot of really great partnerships between ourselves, the state agencies that we work with, and our evaluators at the Education Policy Center. And so now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Win to talk more about quality study.
Thanks, Ben. Hey, everyone, this is Win. Like Ben said, we've worked with the quality tool for a number of years, and we wanted to build capacity for improving program quality beyond that. So we knew the quality tool was a big part of that, but we wanted to move forward in a way that provided additional improvement resources for program providers. And so what I'm going to tell you about now is the study that we conducted last year here in Utah. So we know that not all after-school programs are highly effective, and researchers have identified program quality as a distinguishing feature of program effectiveness. And so for this study, we approach program quality as the presence and robustness of specific program features that are implemented intentionally to maximize specific youth outcomes. And two things that might stand out to you in this definition are that it focuses on the integration of program quality features. Those are obviously central and very important. But then also the additional programming, which we've heard a lot about already, as also being very important. And so these are some of the foundational assumptions that guided us in the development of the model and in the study in general. So we recognize that simply having a list of key program features is critical. It's very important, but those features are best situated within a more robust theoretical explanation about program implementation and improvement. So we wanted program providers to see beyond the quality tool and to think about improving program quality more holistically. The quality tool is certainly one very important and useful tool, but it exists among many others, and we felt like additional resources could be brought into a system and used for program improvement. So another area that stood out to us was the practicality of focusing attention on the point of service as a key leverage point. So much like in the classroom, where teachers play a critical role in shaping the learning experiences of students, after-school program staff shape experiences for participants. And the interaction of staff and students are where the program happens, and we felt like this was a really important area of focus for improvement, and it guided our thinking around this model. So we wanted program providers to think more specifically about what they were trying to achieve and how to take well-informed steps to get there. So the idea of knowing what you hope to accomplish and having an evidence-based plan for how to get there is a fundamental aspect of high-quality, effective programs, and you've heard that as a theme throughout this webinar already. So there's a lot to cover. There are a lot of side conversations we could have related to this study, but this is kind of the central feature. This is the model that we created and used as a foundation for this study. This model was co-created among a group of first technical assistance providers and evaluators, and it relied on technical assistance to implement, and the technical assistance, like Ben said, was provided by his team of UAN specialists who work closely with the site coordinators excuse me, to implement the model. So it's a point-of-service model, and the outcome of interest here is the staff behaviors. You can see that there in the green column. We concluded that staff behaviors may be among the most critical elements for realizing youth outcomes and something that we could have an effect on. So that's where we focused most of our attention in terms of our interest in an outcome for this study. So the quality improvement resources over on the left are sources of evidence. And we asked program providers to use evidence, and then in the next column, plan strategies and implement those strategies that would influence staff behaviors. And examples of evidence might include things like surveys from staff, from students or families, could be program observations, might be academic and attendance data, and could even be informal sources. And the improvement strategies are primarily delivered through ongoing professional development and meetings with staff. And so this model was implemented essentially 3 times throughout the year. And these are approximately 90-day improvement cycles that the technical assistance providers worked with site coordinators, the program providers, to implement the model. In each cycle, they identified and utilized sources of evidence, planned strategies, they implemented those strategies, and then repeated the cycle again. One benefit of this was the opportunity it provided for program providers to identify new data sources that they may not have utilized in the past. And each cycle included a minimum of 1 program observation conducted by the technical assistance provider. So there were 10 after-school program sites in total that participated in this study. 5 of those sites were referred to as traditional technical assistance sites. So Ben and his team provide technical assistance for programs all over the state. And these 5 traditional technical assistance sites received the same technical assistance they'd receive in any year. At 5 other sites, which we'll refer to here as quality improvement sites, the technical assistance providers and site coordinators worked together to implement the model that I just showed you. And this was a research practice partnership, and we utilized a research-based design. So we looked closely at implementation throughout the year and as we conducted the study, and we made changes to the technical assistance based on the data we collected. Here's an example. We used 3 separate implementation logs. Every time that technical assistance providers provided support, they completed a technical assistance log. Both the traditional and the quality improvements also completed logs, but they did that monthly. So the logs were built around the content of the model, and we looked for alignment between reports of the technical assistance that was provided and what site coordinators said was happening at the quality improvement sites, and then we were able to make adjustments as we went through the year based on alignment between those 2 data sources. So yeah, other data sources, we conducted 14 focus groups, we administered pre- and post-test staff surveys, and we analyzed pre- and post-observation data. So we took 2 conceptual approaches to how we analyzed the data. We're definitely looking at a mixed method study here. We wanted to know if the model worked, so in some respect we were testing the model. And then we wanted to know if it was viable, if it had utility, if we should continue to use it, and how we should change it. And to that end, we wanted to understand what else we could learn beyond what we'd collectively prescribed in the model. So it was both prescriptive and exploratory in that sense. So in the analysis of the qualitative data, we used a constant comparative method and cross-case analysis. So we looked for themes in the data, and then we also looked for differences and similarities across the site. And the quantitative data, as you'll see, is all descriptive. So we'll get into some of the results now. These are the quantitative staff survey results from 4 items. And these results suggested that staff members at quality improvement sites started the year knowing less about their program's quality improvement goals than the staff members at the traditional technical assistance sites, but concluded the year knowing more. And so you can see that reflected in the 2 those are the pre-test columns, and then the difference column. So in focus groups and in open-ended survey questions, we asked staff members to describe program quality and their related efforts in their programs. And they gave varied responses. Some focused on quality, others went directly to student outcomes, like academic outcomes, for example. In practice, we prefer to see staff members acknowledge and make the distinction between their quality efforts, which is really a feature of program implementation, and the outcomes they hope to achieve. But some positive highlights of their perspectives included building and maintaining relationships and offering diverse activities. So to understand staff perspectives about intentional programming, we asked them about how they made program implementation decisions. Staff members focused more on informal sources of evidence, such as the ongoing feedback they got from students, than they did on taking a systematic approach to achieve specific outcomes. The theme from the qualitative data was that staff member considered student engagement to be a very important aspect of their work and something that they focused on regularly. So this shows scores from the first and final observations. So similar to the staff survey results, you can see the means at the quality improvement sites started lower than the observation means at the traditional technical assistance sites, but the means at the quality improvement sites finished higher. And you can see that reflected in the two columns there labeled first. These are means from the first observations. And in the difference column, you can see the difference from the first and the final observations for the two types of sites. And this suggested that the quality improvement sites were working to implement program quality standards that were defined in the state's quality tool. And that's what these are, 7 items from the quality tool that were operationalized for the purpose of observation. So it was beyond the scope of our study to test relationships of program quality and youth outcomes. However, we found in the literature 15 studies that reported positive relationships between quality and youth outcomes, and we've summarized those here into these 3 categories. So given the results, we recommended that program providers work closely with staff teams and that they involve them in the program improvement process. That they make sure that staff members understand program goals for both quality and outcomes, and that they provide training that will help the staff achieve those goals. The importance of student engagement was evident both in the literature that we looked at for this study, and it was a theme in our conversations with the staff members. So since student engagement may be a critical step for maximizing outcomes, we included it in the final version of our model, which I'll show you in just a minute. The importance of building relationships was also a theme in the qualitative data, and it's clearly present in the literature as well, and that also appears to be a very critical program component. So as a foundation for program practice, we recommended that program providers operate intentional programs. And simply put, we're emphasizing that this means starting with what you want to achieve and then creating after-school environments that support those intentions. So staff members are the program implementers. And if they don't know what specifically it is they're trying to do, or if they don't know how to do it, then quality and effectiveness can be compromised, and you're essentially relying on luck at that point. So also working with site coordinators to access additional data sources was a valuable aspect of the model implementation, and we recommended using multiple sources of evidence for program improvement. So the quality tool is an important piece of that here in Utah, but we found that using multiple sources of evidence was also valuable and important. So overall, we concluded that the model has utility, and it appeared to be a useful tool, and we recommended that program providers take a systems approach to program improvement. And we got a lot of positive feedback on the 90-day improvement cycles, or moving through it systematically several times in a year, where data was used and observations were conducted, and then technical assistants and site coordinators met together to review those things, make decisions, and implement another cycle of program improvement. And at the year, we felt like that was pretty effective based on the data that we just showed you. So the model was designed for use as a technical assistance model, and one of the things we're talking about now is how it might be able to be used with less technical assistance. So obviously, we're very fortunate here in Utah to have the Utah Afterschool Network and a team of highly trained specialists who can provide this kind of technical assistance. We're curious what we could do with this model, maybe as a standalone piece, maybe with a training for site coordinators, maybe with some other written resources that they could implement on their own. So we're having conversations about that now. And then maybe that's a good place to transition to next steps for what's happening there.
Fantastic. Do you want to talk about
Oh yeah, let me tell you a little bit about this model first. This is the final version of the model, and we tried to simplify each of these sections. You can see there's one fewer column, and everything's pulled together a bit more tightly. We emphasized the 90-day improvement cycles, and we added this piece of youth engagement right between staff outcomes and youth outcomes. So that seems to be a really critical piece. And then we made the importance of intentional programming explicit by using that statement at the bottom to tie all these sections together.
Great. And so I'm actually going to, most of what I have to say about where we are going from here will stay on this slide because it really has largely informed everything that we want to do. And here at UAN, before we had come on, I'm going into my fourth year with the After School Network now. And before we came on, UAN strategies to support programs were not very intentional. They were not very strategic, and they didn't utilize any of this information. And ironically, if you want to help programs plan intentional, high-quality programming, you yourself as the technical assistance provider should probably have some intention motivating you and guiding you in the work that you're able to provide to programs. And so basically, since coming on, my job has been really fun in that I've basically taken Utah's quality improvement system and turned it over on its head numerous times, as frustrating as that may have been for some of the programs that we work with, because we've been tweaking our system as we go. But we've seen a lot of really positive outcomes from that, a lot of great work, and a lot of really productive growth in how quality has been perceived in the state of Utah. As great as the quality tool has been as a standalone tool for programs to utilize it, unfortunately, it had a bit of an identity crisis for programs that were utilizing it, in that completing the quality self-assessment was something that was required by the Department of Workforce Services and the State Board of Education in their scope of work for those funded programs. The quality self-assessment tool was something that was completed near the end of the year, where programs would independently put together a committee to review all the aspects of their program, and then they would then create goals for the following year. Due to the timeline for that, a lot of programs perceived the quality tool to be more of a report for the funding that they were receiving. So they weren't really looking at it in the light of saying, let's look at this to self-reflect and really do a self-assessment and think about where we can be going with this and how we can be improving our programs. And I think a lot of programs were seeing the quality self-assessment as more of like, well, I want to look good when I complete this thing. I'm afraid if I submit this report and it reflects negatively on me, that could impact the funding for my program. And so we've got some issues here. Really, it wasn't being utilized properly for programs, and even though state agencies were wanting to see more kind of report-like results from it, we were being asked for things like, well, what are we learning from the quality self-assessment? What are programs? And we could talk about general trends with what was happening with programs. Well, in the Be Safe section, X number of programs don't have a transportation policy, but it didn't really tell us a lot about the overall quality landscape of programs, and we weren't really doing much to help them to be successful in implementing those quality standards for themselves. And so in utilizing the quality study here, it was great because throughout the quality study, as we were doing this, I was also able to learn as we were going and start developing what our quality improvement model would look like moving forward as we were learning from the study and conducting the study. And so basically from this, where we've been able to go with the quality study and our own quality improvement model to support programs is putting a lot of resources at the front end of the school year to support programs and implementing a better continuous improvement cycle in the technical assistance that we provide to programs. So we have a year-long schedule of specific touch points for programs that we're reaching out and supporting them. One thing that we've had to do is create a prioritization system in the state to help to weed out which programs need the highest level of support and which programs are doing very well. We basically, our technical assistance was very random and inconsistent in how we were executing it. It was a shotgun blast of technical assistance services that in some instances were specific trainings for staff, or some instances training for coordinators, or sometimes just checking in and sharing some resources based on what we had learned from their quality tool submission. So now what we've done is we've identified a few different tiers of levels of quality for programs. So we have a exploring program, which is basically a brand new program or a program that has a very high need for technical assistance and support, those programs get a very robust offering that utilizes all the components from the continuous improvement cycle. So for those programs, we get in there at the beginning of the year, and within the first 2 weeks of their programming, we're conducting an observation. We had utilized for the quality study, we took one of the areas from our quality tool, and as Wynn had mentioned, we operationalized it and turned it into something that was observable. It worked for that, but moving forward, what we're doing is we're actually using the Weichert Center's school age and youth program quality assessment tools to get in and conduct observations for programs. So we're going to go in and conduct observations for those programs that have fallen into our exploring priority level, and we get to that priority level by working with our team to reflect on previous support for those programs. We work with our state agencies that are working with those programs. We also have a scoring rubric for all the programs that are on our caseload to help us to determine if it's first-year funding or first-year program, or if they did not score well on their previous year's quality tools, if they were a high priority in previous years, all of these things to help us root that out. And so basically for those exploring programs, we get in and we conduct a observation within the first 2 weeks of the program. We work with the coordinator and we provide them an opportunity to talk about the observation and to put together an implementation plan for the remainder of the year to talk about what was observed and what needs to fall in place to support that. Then the programs actually conduct their own self-assessment. It's sometimes, depending on how the year goes, best case scenario, they conduct their self-assessment before we've given them feedback on their observation, but it still is useful regardless. They conduct the self-assessment. We work with them to create goals around what they've identified from the self-assessment and the observation, and then we begin the implementation process where, depending on the needs of the program, we may be sitting in on staff meetings and helping the coordinator run a staff meeting. We may be helping them to create their goals, or we may be doing pointed trainings for those programs. One of the greatest things that we learned from this that helped us to zero in the support that we provide to programs is that really, in focusing on those staff outcomes, to best focus on staff outcomes, we need to focus on program leadership. We had gone in and as technical assistants for these programs, done one-on-one shadowing for frontline staff in programs, which was great in the instance that we provided it for short periods after we provided that. But we have high enough turnover in these programs that really if we get in and we give a lot of support to an individual on the front line of a program, that individual could be gone within a year, and there's not a lot of consistency to help move these quality efforts forward. So what we learned from the quality study is that we really need to focus in our effort, and instead of being a resource for the overall program, we're a resource for the coordinator, for the leadership in the program to help to make sure that they have the skills and the understanding of exactly what objectives they have and what their goals are and how to work with their team to create joint plans and joint goals so that the staff have buy-in and an understanding of exactly what their quality improvement methods are, what their mission and vision are for the organization, and what their overall goals are for their organization.
And we're at the top of the hour here, so we want to make sure we get the legislator perspective in.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's been a very effective system, and our biggest focus has been on the continuous improvement cycle. And one of the resources that we'll be sharing out with this is actually our technical assistant map that we utilize in supporting programs and everything along those lines. So as we get into questions, I'll be happy to answer more questions about that, and I definitely want to make sure that Senator Escamilla has her time. So I will gladly turn the time over to Senator Escamilla to share her thoughts on this.
Well, thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Luz Escamilla, and I'm a state senator in the great state of Utah. I'm excited to share more of the work we've done here in the last, really started about 5 years ago. And for years, I was trying to bring more awareness to after school to the state legislature at that state level. In Utah, we historically were focusing most of our after school work and funding from the government side at the local level. A lot of our municipalities and our counties were carrying some of the work, and of course our state agency, in this case, the Department of Workforce Services and the State Office of Education were some of the pass-through agencies from the federal government with regards to after-school funding from the federal government. But I've had an interest for a while to try to standardize what a high-quality after-school program looked like, evidence-based, and that's where the Youth After-School Network was helpful with the SB 125 that we passed in 2016. And as was mentioned before, to me, there were two components. One is you always need financial resources for after school. I mean, we obviously more funding, more children should have access to this quality after school programs. But we needed to put this in a way that for our state legislature could value what this was giving, and that we're in a very conservative state. We have many of our state legislators believe that the role of a child should be at home with their parents, and trying to explain to them that all families have that ability to, be with their children after school, for example. That, we talked about the very basics of why after school programs are so critical to the welfare and the well-being of a child, and see this as an asset towards, quality of life for our residents and economic development at the end, because we also know there's a correlation between high-quality after-school programs and just how good, just the outcome of children with regards to safety and even educational outcomes. So first we started this very aggressive education tool with the help of the after-school network. So that coalition building is very critical. As a state legislator, you can move some of these innovative ideas sometimes in your legislative body without a good coalition. We were targeting specific legislators and having after-school programs within those districts to communicate with them and invite them, not during the session, because of course during the session they don't have time to go, but during the whole year to invite them to participate of their after-school program. So absolutely, I heard someone say how critical it is when you go and visit an after-school program. It really opens your eyes. So I encourage people to do that in their districts, in targeting districts with very key legislators. We also, so when we couldn't get the funding for programs on the first bill, on that SB 125, we still saw, for us it was a victory to just put in statute, to codify what we mean to have, high-quality after-school programs, and what it means to have, what does that mean to have high quality? And I think that's where we started the conversation. For us, with legislators that were evidence-based, so we're talking about evidence-based. We have enough data to make sure that this is working. But then moving us from there, and we couldn't get the funding for the programs themselves, so what we did, to the point that was mentioned before, I was able to appropriate $50,000 for the study, and that was not an easy task because, as you know, if you work with legislators or if you're a legislator yourself, finding funding is sometimes more difficult than the legislation itself, but we were able to secure that money. And then on this next round, we now came back with data. Now we came back with a study that was done, presented by a very, very respected institution. In this case, the University of Utah, and the institution within the University of Utah that was putting this study in place. That gave a lot of credibility, and that's very important too. You want to make sure that you do this work with an institution that is obviously not only qualified but has a credibility within your legislative body, and they appreciate the high quality research work that comes from there. And what we were now trying to focus was on high quality, right? And how do we measure this? Because at the end of the day, legislators have to make decisions between funding a direct program, a direct service, and people were like, wait, you're asking to give money for high quality. I mean, what does that mean, and why would I do that? And what we did is we spent a lot of time, all data-driven, very data-oriented, talking about how the return on investment is there, an ROI. We start talking about ROI. We made it about a private-public partnership. So the key for our bill on this last session, which is SB 202, is really about making sure we discuss a private-public partnership. We created a bill that the state will give money if we get private money in first, and that was like a match. So the state will match whatever we can get from the private sector. And that private-public partnership, I think, was what made it very appealing for many of my colleagues to support legislation like this. And the bill itself, so SB 202, which is after-school amendments, had a $250,000 fiscal note attached to it. But it was, what we did is we said, look, we're all about private-public partnerships in Utah. We believe that, we can work together with the private sector, and we will make this happen by having their support, and the state then has a vested interest because others have an interest as well. So that's how we succeed with this specific piece of legislation is we were able to say there's a return on investment. Look what happens when you invest on high-quality programs. And then we have a key that hasn't been discussed much in this conversation, and maybe you guys can pick up this conversation in a different phone call or a different webinar, and that is we have a data sharing component. And that is very challenging, and especially in our state where we have legislators that feel very passionate about protecting privacy rights of students, and we sometimes struggle a little bit with data sharing. We were able to put that in this bill, and between the providers and the LEAs and the Department of Workforce Services, because we want this to be data-driven. So we feel very happy, aside from focusing and investing on high-quality programs, that we now be able to have data to measure success. So with that, I know the time is short, so I'll pass the time to our facilitator. Thank you.
So much, Senator. And since we are short on time and I don't see any questions in the chat box right now, I would, if you do have questions for speakers, please contact me at ashley.wallace@ncsl.org, and I'll be happy to field those questions and connect you with our speakers. Thank you so much for joining us today, and a big thank you to all of our speakers.